Hello everyone, welcome to my Batman Arkham Knight, Knightmare difficulty, no damage walkthrough. This is Stagg Airships, or Stagg Enterprises, and it's going to go up until the point where Fake Oracle is killed. So, Stagg Airships is one of my favorite parts of the game. I feel like, compared to other parts of the game, you really notice how great the mix-up of encounters is, and also with mechanics. Like, Stagg Airships has one of the best mix-ups of combat, predator, and puzzle elements. And it's in a linear environment, so everything feels very focused. We're not going to get to Stagg Airships immediately. We're going to be partaking in some of the side missions here. I mean, when I say some of the side missions, I really mean only one, because really the APC Lieutenant mission is the only thing that's available at the moment, because a lot of the side missions are locked until you get to Founders Island. Stuff like Penguin, for instance, you have to progress the story. Yeah, so this is really the only thing I'm able to do at the moment. And I've already talked a lot about my thoughts on the APC Lieutenant side missions, but they're awful. This whole Batmobile chase system is poorly implemented in this game. The choice of weaponry with the immobilizer is very poor. And speaking of the immobilizer, it has very shit detection. I think it's entirely dependent upon what direction the Batmobile is facing, but you can use the camera to your advantage, even if the Batmobile is not directly facing the APC, but the APC is actually in camera view. The immobilizer will never detect unless you're actually facing the APC in the correct direction, and I think it's way too strict as well. Like, if you're not directly facing this APC, you're just slightly off, it messes with the detection. And then at times, the detection on the immobilizer, sometimes it can be great at distances, but you have to get in very close a lot of the times, and I really don't know why they had to make the immobilizer so strict on its detection, because then it just leads to so many moments where the detection just fails you, and it's very clunky detection, and that plus the clunky nature to the Batmobile's handling, and the perfect nature to the AI when it comes to their ability to do these turns that the Batmobile just isn't capable of. And speaking of which, when you actually get rid of all the escorts that are actually protecting the APC, there's actually a change in its AI, and it will actually try to go down narrow corridors or do these very sharp turns, or not even try to stay on the street. It will intentionally go on roads that make it very hard for the Batmobile to track, which is an interesting idea, but it only further showcases how poorly handled the Batmobile's control system is. And with how much you're going to be doing like flips, and you're going to be fishtailing, and you're going to be doing all these other things that just really make the Batmobile very cumbersome to handle. So, as much as it is an interesting idea, it only makes the problems even more known. And you have all these people on the forum saying that the APC missions are shit, but then they say, oh, it's attributed to difficulty, like get good, this and that, without fully understanding the problems involved with the fundamental systems, with the Batmobile, and with the chases, and with the AI. And that's why forums are very unreliable, because they try to attribute these sort of aspects to player agency, when in actuality it's the game's fault. So, yeah, very unreliable, but at least I can relate to them a bit. But I've just done that one APC side mission, and I've also taken down some Serpent drones. And we're now doing this Predator encounter that's part of the main story. So this Watchtower is actually available at the beginning, but you can't do anything until you actually get to this point in the game. And this is where you're going to be seeing some very interesting strategies with actually staying on a high place and using the ladders to your advantage to actually get the drop on enemies. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to silently take out this guy, and then I'm going to use the knockdown smash in order to take out this guy and make some noise. So, because the only way for enemies to get to me is via ladders, this will allow me to take advantage of explosive gel and the batarangs. And there's only 3 enemies left, and 2 of them are just coming right at me. The last one's a drone operator, which you can just hack him and use the drone on one of them, but it takes too long, and the detection on hacking the drone operator is very strict, because you have to get in so close to them. But see, I'm already done. And when you have only the drone operator left, he'll just quit, and he'll just say, I don't need the drone anymore, because he doesn't want to be in a position where Batman's going to easily get the drop on him. But either way, he's the last guy, so Batman will get the drop on him. Yeah, I love these kind of behaviors with the militia. And I love the behavior of the militia overall. I like that they have a personality, because so many games have NPCs or enemy types that just don't have any sense of personality to them. Like, Assassin's Creed, the older games specifically, they represent an AI system that actually has a personality. Like, I love the quotes that they say when you're in combat with them or when you're being chased by them. I mean, that's why I did a guard quote video when they're chasing you or when they're in combat with you for Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood, because I just love the fact that there's personality there, and I just wish more developers would do that, where they actually give more personality to enemy types. And this game actually gives a lot of personality to its enemies. And really just hearing all the conversations between the militia and some of the fun dialogue that they get into is more entertaining than the game itself, and more entertaining than any of the other characters or big supervillains that you hear. And, you know, I like that they're not cold reptiles like any stereotypical soldier or just persons for hire or any mercenaries. You know, these people actually have emotion, and they actually have reasons for joining up with the militia. Like, a lot of them are actually former army personnel, and the army treated them very poorly, or they related to the Arkham Knight on some level, and the Arkham Knight promised them a lot better, which once again really showcases one of the things that makes Batman very one-dimensional in this crime-fighting crusade. And I've already talked about this a lot, but Batman doesn't really explore a lot of these avenues where people just feel very disenfranchised, and therefore they turn to a life of crime. And because money makes the world go around, and because people feel like they have a lot more of a purpose and they actually get rewarded for their purpose, or they feel like they're achieving their goals when in the criminal element rather than being a dutiful citizen, that's why a lot of them are just turning against Gotham, and Gotham has failed them. And I should know, because I am doing a project on military lawyers, and I'm learning a lot about them through my schoolwork. And it's interesting. It's very interesting, you know, seeing all these thoughts that are portrayed in shows and cartoon shows and also in movies, like in the real world. And, you know, that I totally understand why the militia are going against Gotham, and I totally understand why they're going up against Batman, even if, you know, Batman, he means well, and, you know, he doesn't kill people. I mean, and some of these other militia guys are just very, like, sadistic, and they're sociopaths, and, you know, a lot of them are incorrigible, but some of them do have a reason for being there, and I totally understand that. And, you know, I think Rocksteady nailed the personalities on the militia. They're a lot more interesting than the thugs, that's for sure. I think the thugs feel very generic, even though one conversation that I do find intriguing about the thugs is when they're talking about Protocol 10, and they're talking about the idea that criminals have more rights and a lot more protection than civilians do. And, you know, it's funny because that's exactly how the law works in our society, where it does feel like criminals do have a lot more rights than others. And, you know, like, there's so many things that get in the way of true justice when it's all about image. Like, you know, military lawyers and their organizations have to focus a lot on their image. They have to focus on cases that will actually bolster their reputation. And because of this, true justice is never going to be the case, or they have other like bureaucratic methods getting in the way, because that's just the bureaucratic red tape right there. But that's just the unfortunate reality of these kind of situations, and it was very funny when they did that. And did you see that just then? I slowed that down. So the enemies on this game have the ability to grab you, and when they do grab you, you can initiate a beatdown from there that will allow you to increase your combo meter and actually build towards your special combo attacks. Well, when you try to use the critical beatdown to actually glide towards an enemy and completely avoid the grab, the enemies that are trying to grab you, they will actually teleport with you, so they'll grab you before you have a chance to initiate the critical beatdown. I mean, it's not that big of a deal because it doesn't kill your combo, and when they do grab you, you can just cash in on more combo. But it can be very frustrating when you're trying to use the critical beatdown to get away from a bunch of enemies if they're surrounding you, and they just grab you in the process. And that guy was trying to grab me just then, but I dodged it by using the multi-ground takedown. And you'll also see me using the quick batarang in order to knock out enemies that are outside the crowd, and then I'm using the critical beatdown. So this fight is the best representation of how great the critical beatdown is, and it just gives you an additional option for dealing with enemies that are floored to the ground, which is something that the previous games never did very well at. Like, the only possible way you were going to hit enemies on the ground in the previous games is if you were doing the ground finish or the multi-ground takedown. The ground finish, you leave yourself vulnerable to enemy attacks, and the multi-ground takedown is only possible to do if you have the gold multiplier. So the fact that the game is finally giving you the ability to do basic attacks on enemies and actually grab enemies off the ground to initiate a critical beatdown is beautiful design. And the detection on the critical beatdown is amazing. You can grab enemies that are so far away from you, and it just allows the free flow to be complemented greatly. Distance should never be a factor to consider when it comes to a paired animation system complementing a free flow combat system. Like, you should always get unlimited range on certain attacks. Distance should never be a factor to consider because it's so easy for enemies to do very strange behavior that just causes them to back away from you, and then you're at the risk of bad detection due to distance. And the fact that the critical beatdown has some incredible range is amazing. And I actually noticed something else about the critical beatdown system. So the enemies on this game have the ability to pick up any enemies that are floored to the ground so that the floored enemies can recover faster. But one thing I've noticed is that during the animation of actually getting picked up off the ground from their friends, you can initiate a critical beatdown on the guy that is being picked up by his friends. And that is pretty interesting to note. So apparently the game still classes them as being in a floored state even when they're being picked up by their friends. So that's an important tip to note. And here is some puzzle elements involved with the tilt mechanic. So we're taking advantage of the airship stability using the remote hacking device to tilt it and move these crates out of the way. And it's an interesting puzzle element, and it's kind of fun. And I do agree with Sergeant 17 that it's one of the more interesting puzzle elements. But you need to make sure that you lock down certain crates so that they don't get in your way when you're tilting. And the crates that don't have any locks on them, you'll have to tilt the airship so that they aren't in your way, and that is how it will work. I think it would be very interesting if you could use this stability mechanic in order to affect the flow of combat or predator encounters. Like, imagine being able to trip up enemies, or imagine knocking objects into them that will actually incapacitate them. Like, that would be a very interesting way to incorporate a new element for one specific area of the game. And, I like it when developers put in these unique mechanics specific to one area because it really makes the mechanics have value. And, it's a one-time thing, so you can appreciate it in that moment, and it doesn't feel overused or trite. But they didn't do so, and I guess it would present with a lot of mechanical problems as well, because then they'd have to factor in all these other elements with tilting, and yeah, I can totally understand that. But right here, do a fear takedown, but make sure you do it like this, because if you don't do it like this, you will never hit the second guy with the fear takedown, given that console's in the way. But that guy will try to climb the ladder, so knock him off. And most likely this guy will climb the ladder, which he's doing right now. So there we go. And always make sure that you hit them when they're on ladders. If you try hitting them with a batarang or a back claw whenever they're not on ladders or whenever they're not on a ledge, you will never be able to knock them off. And I don't know why they do this, because it removes one of the more creative elements from the predator encounters. And, I mean, when the game is putting enemies in a position that they don't necessarily have to be in, I should be rewarded for taking advantage of that situation. I mean, that's what Batman would do. And, these ledges aren't even that high, so it's not like they'll die from the fall. They'll be knocked unconscious and maybe have some broken bones, but that's the whole point. And even then, when it's, like, shown in the gameplay, it's not exactly you can take it at face value, like, this is actually how Batman did it. So, like, just because it's shown in the gameplay doesn't mean this is exactly what Batman did. So, like, where is the consequence involved with actually using this mechanic to its best? Like, where is the consequence involved with actually using the batarang and the bat claw on enemies that are near ledges? I don't see any problem with it. And you see that just then? So I actually used my batarang to lure the guys up there, and I didn't expect it to work. I mentioned in the first video that this mechanic of using the batarang to distract enemies whenever they have those icons above their head, all it does is just cause them to look in that direction but not go and investigate. But that situation was different. But I'm guessing the reason for that was maybe their emotional state, because one thing you have to bear in mind with the Batman Arkham games is that in Predator encounters, the emotional states of the enemies can change depending on how many enemies you're taking out, because of course they're terrified that their numbers are slowly dwindling and they might be the only ones left. So this causes their behavior to be very different. Like, for instance, whenever you drop in front of enemies in Predator encounters and they're either calm or nervous, they will immediately shoot you. Whereas if they're terrified and you drop right in front of them, they're very slow to respond to you because they're in shock. You pretty much shock them by jumping right in front of them. So that's an interesting idea, and I imagine maybe it has some relevance, that whole mechanic of using the batarang to actually distract enemies and cause them to go to that direction. Because what I noticed in that particular piece of footage involving the batarang actually luring those enemies is they said stop it. And I think they only say stop it when they're terrified. So I think those three enemies were terrified, and that's why they were actually seeing where the sound came from. And because of this, they went on the ladder, and I was able to use the batarang to my advantage. And also, like, the reason why they still continued going up the ladder is because when he fell, he made noise. So I imagine they're trying to investigate where he was at the point where the batarang hit, rather than where he actually fell. And this is a behavior you're able to take advantage of in the A Matter of Family DLC when you're doing the Ferris wheel predator encounter. Because what you can do is you can use the smoke pellet on the first couple of enemies climbing that ladder, because there's only two possible ways that the enemies can get to you. Either they drop onto the platform you're on, or they climb a ladder to get to you. And if they're climbing the ladder, you can use the batarang to knock them off, and they will just continue actually climbing the ladder until they fulfill their protocol of investigating the noise of their friends falling. And this allows you to end that predator encounter so quickly. And as a safety measure, you can place explosive gel on the ground if any enemy decides to drop down onto your platform, so that you can get rid of multiple enemies and just floor them and then finish them off with ground takedowns, or it will actually keep you safe, which is wonderful design. And if they're not investigating the sound immediately, you can use your dive bomb technique, because I mentioned many times that dive bombing in this game and completing the animation when you hit the ground makes noise. And you can take advantage of that mechanic in certain predator encounters, and you saw me demonstrate that mechanic when we were at the Grand Central Station area when we were trying to lower the bridges onto Miyagani Island. I used the dive bomb technique to lure enemies, and then when they backed away, I was able to use a silent takedown, refill my fear takedown, do the dive bomb again, and do the fear takedown, which is so powerful. And, they haven't changed it whatsoever, so they haven't changed the dive bomb mechanic, yet they've changed the ability to pull enemies off of ledges and actually push them off of ledges. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, you're already giving us a very powerful option. Why would you take away another powerful option? Like, the whole point of the Batman Arkham games is the power fantasy that Batman delivers in his combat and predator capabilities. And, compared to something like Batman the Animated Series, where somehow Batman is so incapable of fighting enemies even though he's traveled the world, and then he's slow to react to, like, the slowest attacks ever, or when he sees enemies charging right at him over, like, 6 feet, and it takes him so long to respond, and, like, I can't stand that about the way Batman is portrayed in Batman the Animated Series. And I get it's there for, like, the kid-friendly stuff, or, like, to give Batman a more human side, but at least present his human side in a way that makes sense, and it actually feels like he has traveled the world, and he's actually developed a fighting prowess and a stealth prowess that is so far beyond, like, the normal human being's capabilities. I mean, this guy has reached the peak of his physical conditioning. That's why he's as strong as he is. That's why in the Batman Arkham City cinematic trailer, it's shown that he was able to break through a brick wall, or he's capable of all these other feats of strength that are just so, like, impossible to achieve unless you devote yourself to like, rigorous training and the like. I mean, it is possible to achieve such peaks in physical conditioning in the real world, but the amount of dedication needed, the amount of dieting you have to do, the mental fortitude, especially, like the whole trauma of him losing his parents. Like, you need to have, like, some kind of motivation to continue to actually exercise or to actually partake in these kind of, like, laborious tasks. And Batman actually had that kind of psychological motivation, and the fact that he was so focused on, like, the hatred towards Joe Chill and, like, the hatred towards criminality to actually continue doing what he's doing. And it's incredible when it's portrayed so perfectly in the Batman Arkham series, even if at times Batman isn't exactly the more humane sort compared to how he is in Batman the Animated Series. But I will always prefer the Batman Arkham version of Batman when it comes to how he's presented in the combat and predator scenarios compared to how he is in every other form of media. And, I like how straight and to the point Batman feels in this game compared to how he is in the animated series or in these other, like, shows. Like, do you know the amount of times Batman has the drop on enemies in those shows, and then he just announces himself, or he tries to come up with some kind of clever one-liner that causes the enemies to know where he is, and therefore he loses the element of surprise? That never happens in the Batman Arkham series. That never happens at all, because it has to be represented in the gameplay as a Predator scenario. So Batman is actually feeling like he's straight into the point, and he's actually being smart with what he's doing compared to how he is in other like TV shows or movies. And it's a better design choice with Batman compared to how he's presented in the cartoons or in the movies. But right here, we're getting some history onto Simon Stagg and Scarecrow's work on the Cloudburst. I just took the time to listen to all this. I mean, I'm still kind of confused as to how events played out with Simon Stagg, because Simon Stagg is portrayed as being a very greedy person, and he's worked on like fulfilling the arms race or creating like some kind of way of killing humans. Yet at some point, apparently, he was helping people, and like he says, Dr. Crane created some kind of toxin, like the toxin that he uses. It could be used to cure depression, turn an army upon itself. But I don't know if Simon actually meant that he could weaponize it, or he was actually trying to help people. I mean, there is some confusion with that with regards to Simon Stagg, like how the events played out chronologically. Like, was he originally like helping people, and then he became a weapons manufacturer because he saw the whole financial benefit involved with that, or was he always like evil, but then for some weird reason he was helping people? It's a little confusing. I'm not too sure how the events played out, or maybe it's just I haven't indulged in the lore properly. But it's cool that it gives you lore here. And also, when you collect all the Riddler trophies associated with a specific area, I think it's specific to Stagg Enterprises, you hear audio logs from Alex Sartorius, and he was a former employee of Stagg Enterprises who was actually... I think he was actually Stagg's partner, and he was one of the people that helped make the Cloudburst. So I like that Rocksteady gave us some more insight into how the Cloudburst was actually made. I like it when developers take the time to refine certain elements like that with the story, rather than favoring like vague story details, like with Resident Evil Village. Like, Resident Evil Village's storytelling is awful, and they promised masterful storytelling with Resident Evil Village, but it completely violates the lore. They take such cheap shortcuts in storytelling, like, for instance, with how Miranda actually stumbled upon the Megamycete, and like somehow the Mutamycete slash Megamycete. I mean, it's they don't really specify any differences between the mold, the Mutamycete, and the Megamycete, and like some of the capabilities of the Mutamycete. While it is cool that the Mutamycete just seems like the most powerful bioweapon in existence, and it just makes all the other bioweapons we've dealt with just very obsolete. And I just wish it was better represented. And then you have stuff like Cassandra, Bella, and Daniela, and their abilities don't make any sense, and it just seems very, like, fantasy-like. Like, how are they able to manifest clothes? How are they able to manifest teeth, eyes, all these things that shouldn't be possible if they're entirely composed of insects, or, like, flies, or, like, whatever insects they're, I mean, I think they're flies, actually, yeah, that's specified in the journal, but, like, it doesn't make any sense for that to be the case, and then they're able to hold weapons and transport them through doors, and, like, it doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't make any sense at all. And, like, the other mutations make a little bit more sense, but at the same time, I just feel like they took some cheap shortcuts with actually twisting the science of bioorganic weapons and the science of reality to just give them this kind of creative liberty with fantasies, almost to a very similar degree like with the live-action Resident Evil films. Like, I hate Alice from the Resident Evil movies, and I hate her abilities. I hate how they ruined the older Resident Evil characters like Leon, and they just made them like pushovers just to make Alice seem better than them, just to make Alice seem very powerful. Like, this is a method that a lot of writers use where they try to make other characters shit to make their main character seem like the best. And it's a very cheap way to inflate a character's capabilities. Like, you shouldn't have to ruin your side characters to make the main character great. I mean, I'm okay with this with certain situations. Like, they ruined Chris Redfield in Resident Evil Village because he's not Chris Redfield. He plays like shit. He talks like shit. He's a fucking idiot compared to every other character in Resident Evil Village. And I'm so glad they made him shit to make Ethan Winters so great, because Ethan Winters was already amazing. But to have him be, like, better due to the fact that Chris is an idiot in Resident Evil Village and he doesn't feel like Chris Redfield. He feels like some fake Chris Redfield. Now, I'm glad they did it like that. But at the same time, angry with them that they could ruin Chris Redfield. And why is he on the cover art for Resident Evil Village when he's not even like such a prominent character throughout Resident Evil Village? And like, what the hell is he doing throughout the events of Resident Evil Village? And Like he's such a badly designed character. He's the worst character in Resident Evil Village. To think they made my second favorite character in all of the Resident Evil series the worst character in Resident Evil Village. He feels just about as idiotic as his Resident Evil 1 remake self. And it was all done because they just wanted to satisfy whatever they promoted in the initial releases for Resident Evil Village. And it's fucking awful. It's really bad. Almost as bad as this, though. Like, I don't understand this whole Joker arc right here. So, like, the Titan-infected blood that Batman supposedly cured during the events of Batman Arkham City, he somehow, like, has it. And Joker's consciousness, like the consciousness that is still continuing after his death in Batman Arkham City, is manifesting right here. And apparently the fear toxin is amplifying the effects of the Titan that is currently in Batman's body. Like, I don't understand how that worked. Like, did the fact that Batman took half of the cure and he was going to give the half to Joker, like, the fact that he didn't take a full dose, did that have something to do with it? Because, like, they mass-produced this cure, surely. Like, they got this cure out to so many other like, patients. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And, like, why didn't Batman, like, take another dose? Like, isn't this part of, like, some daily regimen that he's supposed to take? Like, it just, like, how can he still be infected by the Titan-infected blood if he cured it in Batman Arkham City? And why is Joker's consciousness manifesting here through a blood disease that has nothing to do with the brain? It doesn't make any sense, and it's just a cheap way to introduce Joker, and it's not like it serves any kind of story purpose aside from the ending of the game, because Joker just feels more like a distraction from what's happening in the main story compared to, like, how he is in the ending of the game. And, you know, like, I feel like if Joker was actually just a hallucination generated by the fear toxin, and, you know, like, he's been such a prodding thought in Batman's mind, and the fear toxin just let him out in that moment, that would have made a lot of sense. And, you know, like, Batman could have easily had that mental warfare, and, like, Joker is kind of the representation of Batman's, like, fears, like his darkest secrets, his hatred and the like. And then when he finally conquers it, that's why Scarecrow's fear toxin has no effect on him. Like, that could have been better represented had they not tried to set up this whole, like, convoluted storyline that is just so cheap in its storytelling aspects. And it's definitely, like, one of the worst parts of Batman Arkham Knight's story. And really, I don't know which game has a worse story. I don't know if Batman Arkham Knight has a worse story than Resident Evil Village or vice versa. I mean, like, both games have some really weird inconsistencies with their lore, and they negate the use of certain characters. I mean, I've already talked about Mia and Chris so much in Resident Evil Village and how poorly utilized they are. And then Batman Arkham Knight, it doesn't utilize Robin, Barbara, or Gordon that much, so you can't really relate to them on, like, a personal level. But, you know, I do feel like Batman Arkham Knight does a better job at telling a more detailed story and actually putting in a lot of, like, minor points that just add that more depth to the storyline. Like, for instance, with what I've just discussed with Alex Sartorius and his involvement in the Cloudburst project, compared to Resident Evil Village, where the storytelling is so vague and so simplistically designed that it just leads to so much confusion with what they were trying to go for with certain story elements. Like, for instance, when Miranda says that Rose is Evelyn, like, Rose is Evelyn's true successor, does that mean Rose is Evelyn, or does that mean that Rose is a successor in the sense that she has better control of her abilities compared to Evelyn, so she feels like a natural extension to Evelyn's abilities? Or, like, why is it that the BSAA are suddenly evil out of nowhere when it wasn't really established properly between Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village? And all we have to go on for that point is that the BSAA was established by the Global Pharmaceutical Consortium, which Umbrella was a part of. I mean, the Global Pharmaceutical Consortium is a series of pharmaceutical companies, and pharmaceutical companies in the Resident Evil universe are attributed to being, like, very evil organizations, as we've seen with Umbrella and Tricell. So that right there is really the only piece of information we have to go on for why the BSAA would be evil, but nothing else really, like, showcases the BSAA's descent into evil and being a very rotten organization. Like, it's just so out of the blue that you can't say it's due to masterful storytelling as what they advertised in their promotion for Resident Evil Village. Like, when you go to the PlayStation homepage, they promised masterful storytelling in Resident Evil Village, but the amount of times the lore is violated from Resident Evil 7, or they introduce a lot of cheap shortcuts in the storytelling. Let me just give you another example. Ethan being made out of the mold. The biggest plot hole in all of Resident Evil Village. Resident Evil Village establishes that Ethan actually died when he was in the guest house area for Resident Evil 7, when Jack actually caved his head in by stomping on him. But if that is the case, why didn't Ethan succumb to stage 2 mutation where he was completely subservient to Evelyn's influence? The mold should have spread into his brain, and he should have been Evelyn's. Like, Evelyn should have had complete control over him, yet this control was never displayed. Ethan is somehow perfectly fine. He's not able to fall under Evelyn's influence at all. Evelyn never displayed her ability to calcify the mold that was inside of him to actually paralyze him, like she did with Zoe. And when Ethan was coming very close to killing her, why didn't she use that ability to her advantage? And you're telling me that the BSAA never tried to give Ethan the cure when they actually rescued him after Resident Evil 7? And people want to say, oh, it's because the BSAA had plans for him, some evil plan, yet nothing in Resident Evil Village has anything to do with Ethan Winters. No kind of plan that the BSAA had anything to do with Ethan Winters being made out of the mold. And it's basic procedure to test the individuals that come out of a bioterror outbreak, or some kind of outbreak involving a bioweapon, and to actually make sure that they're vaccinated, to ensure that they have proper tests run on them. But apparently they didn't do it with Ethan Winters. So 3 years since Resident Evil 7, and nobody noticed that Ethan's behavior or physical capabilities didn't make any sense, a normal human being standpoint. Are you kidding me? That right there, how'd that not cross their minds when designing Ethan Winters the way they did in Resident Evil Village? And just from a character relatability standpoint, how can I relate to Ethan Winters when he's just a mutant? When he's a bioweapon, pretty much, where he has these capabilities of mold-infected individuals to regenerate limbs, yet he completely violates the lore established in Resident Evil 7. And, I relate to Ethan Winters so much because he was a normal individual. But they just ruined it all by making him be made out of the mold. And I just feel like that whole sacrifice scene, I go into tears every time I watch that sacrifice scene. In the moment, I'm in tears whenever I watch Ethan Winters' sacrifice from Resident Evil Village. But then when you just factor in the lore inconsistencies involved, and with how Ethan being made out of the mold doesn't make any sense, it really feels like they put in that sacrifice scene so that they didn't want to explain Ethan Winters' condition in the later games. And I know one of my subscribers, Polkit Sharma, says I am being very hard on the ending, and I wish I could agree with them. I wish I had the ability to tell myself I'm being hard and I shouldn't press this issue any further. But believe me, Polkit Sharma, I wish I could do that, but I just can't. That game just has so many inconsistencies with its story. It has very bad gameplay mechanics, and something still draws me to that game. Something still keeps me positive about that game. I'm almost half tempted to do a live stream of Resident Evil Village where I try to beat the game, but without saying anything negative about the game, by remaining positive the entire time I'm doing Resident Evil Village. And I feel like that's going to be a challenge. That's more of a real challenge compared to Tynhard's idea of challenge, where he thinks, oh, it's better to do knife only and just make the gameplay drag out and make the gameplay seem like you're being a freaking idiot, making the gameplay seem like some person recovering from a coma is playing the game without any sense of mental understanding. That actually falls in line with that of a normal human being. Stupid runs like that are nothing compared to the challenge of trying to play Resident Evil Village without actually saying anything bad about the game. Because that game, it's almost like it wants you to hate it from a story perspective and from a gameplay perspective. And I'm trying my best to be as positive as possible in Resident Evil Village, but something always happens in Resident Evil Village that just makes me very furious on an objective level. And that'll be a very interesting live stream if I can actually play Resident Evil Village without getting angry with the game. So I think I'll probably do that for a future live stream. But going back to the main point that I was saying, maybe Resident Evil Village has a worse story than Batman Arkham Knight. At least Batman Arkham Knight has a little bit more detail to it, and at least they establish certain points a little bit better, and they elaborate on previous points established in the previous games. But, stuff with the way the side missions or just present themselves, the characters just saying all these things just at this moment for whatever reason, and the heavy-handed storytelling involved with the Arkham Knight being Jason Todd, and the idea of Joker somehow manifesting in the Titan-infected blood that Batman somehow didn't cure back in Batman Arkham City. Stuff like that is very, very bad in Batman Arkham Knight, but, not really to the same degree as what I would say with Resident Evil Village. So, yeah, I think Resident Evil Village is definitely the worst game in terms of storytelling between the two games. And that's all I'm going to say on that particular tangent. But I'm just taking the time to do some watchtowers. And the game establishes that Oracle or fake Oracle is in danger during this whole moment after Scarecrow leaves the airships. But I'm doing these side missions just to really display this ludonarrative dissonance right here because none of the side missions are disabled. There's no kind of timer to get to where Oracle is in the safe house. You're just free to do whatever you want, and even when I just go straight to where fake Oracle dies, it's an easy event to forget because so much happens in the game, even in the side missions, it just makes you forget the whole event. So I'm not too sure what they were trying to go for with just killing Oracle in this scene, but it just doesn't really work. I don't feel a lot of impact from it because of the fact that this game, in its open world format, doesn't really make it known that you're supposed to feel something from fake Oracle dying. That's what I'm going to say right there. And there's just a lot of moments like that in Batman Arkham Knight, aside from the moments where Batman's being awesome. When Batman's being awesome, it's easy to remember those moments, regardless of what you've been doing in the side missions. But with these kind of major events where characters die, I feel like it's too easy to forget at times. And that might be a subjective bias, or maybe it's an objective thing. I think it's more so on the subjective side. I wonder how you guys feel about that, how it's so easy to forget certain events in this game when you're partaking in the side missions, or even when you're going through the main story by itself. But I'd be curious to hear. But we have a watchtower right here. It just has that device that you need to disable with the remote hacking device, and it has a couple of sentry guns, which I guess I'll talk a bit about the remote hacking device. So the remote hacking device pretty much has very similar functionality to the cryptographic sequencer, where you can access door panels and input passwords, although I will say, though, the detection on certain halves of the words is a lot more strict on this game compared to the previous games. Like, you have to be like pushing the analog in the correct direction, like in a very like strict direction compared to the leniency provided from Batman Arkham City and Batman Arkham Origins. I feel like it was a lot easier to actually complete those hacks compared to what it's like in Batman Arkham Knight, where the detection is so strict that even if you're slightly off, you're gonna lose out on your ability to input that half of the word. So that's the first thing I'll acknowledge about the remote hacking device, and you can also use it to hack drones and hack sentry guns to disable the cameras. So by doing this, you can disable the drone for a couple of seconds, and you can only disable one at a time. So right here for this particular side mission, I'm going to disable that turret, and I'm going to use a smoke pellet here. Because I can't imagine why they would put in all of these turrets right here if this game has a free-flow combat system where Batman does whatever the hell he wants. And what if an enemy stepped into the sentry gun's line of fire and Batman prioritized that guy? You get shot. And there's not enough room here for the free-flow combat to work, so this is probably what the developers are expecting you to do with the smoke pellet, and with also using the fear takedown. So that's why I'm doing it like that. And that is the end of this side mission. And there's going to be a transition here just to showcase that I destroyed all these turrets. And we're going to move on to the next watchtower, because there are a lot of watchtowers and checkpoints currently active on the islands right now. I mean, mainly on Miyagani Island, not so much in Bleak Island. But this watchtower right here gave me a bit of trouble, because I went into it a little too fast. You've got to have a lot of patience when doing these. I don't really have much patience, because I just rush in there just wanting to have a lot of fun. But this watchtower, I recommend disabling the medic's pack, disabling the ammo crate, and also make sure you take out the 2 gunners that are patrolling. Yeah, Rocksteady did a clever job with this one, with not rewarding observation and actually punishing those who rushed in a little too quickly. Like, I have so much fun with the combat on this game, and just dealing with the enemies, that I just completely forget the other options, which, you know, forgetting all the other options is not the Batman way. This is the Batman way, with actually scoping out your environment, planning your tactics accordingly, making sure everything is in your favor at the start. Of course, if you're talking about the Batman animated series version of Batman, it's different, where he just kind of rushes into everything a little too quickly just to showcase some very cheeky action. But I disabled the medic's pack, and I also disabled the ammo crate right there, and I'm going to take out these 2 gunners right over here. It's crazy going through this game again and just completely forgetting how to handle a lot of these side missions and militia towers and checkpoints and all these other things that I just completely forgot about. Because that showcases how long it's been since I've actually played this game. Because I haven't played this game in a while. But I guess it does lead to some positivity, though, because it feels like a very fresh game in the process of coming back to it after a long duration. You know, that's why I say always return to your games with a fresh mindset compared to what Tynehard or all these other people do, where they try to like milk their game so much and just do all these stupid runs because they want to get some kind of new experience out of it, regardless of whether the experience compromises the game or not. I mean, it's like they don't love the game anymore. It's like they're experimenting with changing things around in the game to deliver a new feeling regardless of the consequences, like a drug addict seeking a fix, or experimenting with the mixture of various drugs when they develop a tolerance. Almost like what Tom does to Myrtle in The Great Gatsby, where he only views her as a tool for physical pleasure that he wants to change around a lot, rather than someone he's actually content with. Like, in the famous words of Ethan Winters to describe people like Tynard, what a freak. I swear, guys, Tynard has been lingering in my head, just with how content he feels with his faulty and abnormal ideologies on gaming, and just the way he tries to defend them, and calling me the odd one. Like, if you haven't seen my most recent Knives Out video for Resident Evil Village for Castle Dimitrescu, you need to check it out, because I was so stupefied by how much he took the time to write the things he said to me in my first Knives Out video as if it were doctrine in his mind, as if he maintained these bizarre beliefs for years and considered them normal in how you approach or perceive a game, and when even considering doing stupid runs. And just the way he tried to gaslight the situation by making it seem like I was the villain without fully grasping the words I was saying. You could tell he was truly lost, and he never watched my prior videos to truly get an understanding of who I was. And it doesn't help that a lot of the things he said to me were contradicted by himself. I even saved that comment as a memento to that situation, so that whenever I had the urge to laugh at something, I would laugh at that. Like, if this were the 90s or the start of the 21st century, I could understand such crass and outdated comments, because gaming back then was more of a milking schema, where it could be on par with drug abuse and its pettiness, or on par with the Neanderthal era of humanity, and the stereotype of kids staring at the screen and drooling was at its height. But that mentality doesn't work anymore, and the only people that hold on to that mentality are the gullible sort, who believe they're above others when indulging in the most impractical runs that have less to do with complementary challenges that fit the game, and more to do with banging their head against the wall as if it's a high value, as if that's somehow like something skillful, as if that's actually like a trait that is befitting for those who are actually strong, and for those who actually have the guts to do things that no normal human being would do. But there's a fine line between skillful and foolish, and for those people, like those normal human beings who don't do these kind of stupid runs, they don't do it for a reason, because it's fucking impractical, because it borders on pure stupidity, because it borders on foolish. And if you seriously think that that is actually like something to take pleasure in, then you are forever lost. I mean it. Or you probably don't have the capacity to feel fatigue, which is an integral part of actual self-awareness, to make you reevaluate whatever the hell you're doing. And that only further contributes to the fact that you are forever lost. Or in Tynard's case, he actually told me that maybe he likes suffering in these kind of games, which with that kind of sadomasochistic attitude and that kind of mentality, can you really take him seriously at that point? When he's leaving the kind of comments he's leaving in my first video for my Knives Out series on Resident Evil Village to actually shit on new Capcom? No, you can't. And just with what I've discussed so far, it hardly seems like the most human mentality if you think playing the game like it's 1% finished is somehow showing the game at its best. Yet these people want to say it's skillful or intelligent or embracing smart tactics without understanding the nuances and rationale involved when using those words that could be easily identifiable to any person with a brain. And it's clear when they're just using these words blindly with complete ignorance, and they haven't even taken the time to understand the circumstances involved with when you're supposed to use these words. Then they really are, and I'm going to say this again for like the third time, forever lost. Just like what Obi-Wan said to Anakin during their final battle on Mustafar in Revenge of the Sith, when he said Anakin was lost after hearing Anakin's improper rationale in non sequiturs. But I think I've said enough about this, and I'll be saying more about this in my future Knives Out videos for Resident Evil Village. But one final thing I'd like to say in order to relate this to Batman. Tynard is like the Joker to my Batman, which I think is the perfect way to conclude this tangent, and I hope to God I don't go on this tangent again for this walkthrough. That's all I'll say right there. And the funny thing about this is, I'm voicing this as if I'm talking to a large audience, when in actuality I only have like 5 people that watch my videos. Although for some reason I've had less people watch my videos for Arkham Knight, because the previous video I uploaded, only one person has left a like. I don't understand how these people work when they're actually watching videos. Do they just watch the earlier videos and then they just stop watching the later videos? That's what I've noticed as a trend with YouTube when you're doing like multiple parts to a video series. The later parts never receive enough views compared to the earlier parts, and it's so confusing. But hey, I'm not doing this for views. I'm doing this because I want to actually do some commentary for YouTube, because this is one of my favorite pastimes. And the thought of actually having a lot of people watching my videos is tertiary in my hierarchy. Unless we have like a lot of views for stuff like my most memorable Ethan Winters quotes, which I'm so glad that so many people have been liking that video. I've had like 239 likes for that video already. It just goes to show how much love Ethan Winters is getting right now. And yeah, I take a lot of pleasure from the fact that I did that video, and I'm really happy for it. But I'm just going to stop the commentary right here. This is the end of Stagg Airships. Stay tuned for the future videos. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.